Hi, my name is Vlad and you are on my channel. Today we are going to talk about new features of JavaScript 2022. They aren't that mainstream yet, and that's why this is the best time when you start learning them and start practicing them to show off in front of your colleagues at lunch in your office, or to surprise your senior colleagues in next code review. Let's start. Unless you're working from home and the only dev you can show off in front of is you. It's so sad and lonely. Hi. Right now we will take a look at the first feature is the private methods and private fields in JavaScript. Let's say in the code. This is a usual web component code. As you can see, I create a new web component, cheer up. I define it here, register it, and after I add it to the page. As you can see, I created it with as a usual DOM element and up into the body, for example. As you can see, there are like a bunch of private fields and private methods. First of all, there are like obligatory, not obligatory, but the API of the browser of the web components. The methods like connected callback and attribute changed callback. These are the hooks that browser provide us to emulate, to subscribe to the life cycle of this element. For example, when the element will be added to the DOM, this method will be called by browser, and I can somehow render something, on this element, or do something. For example, request, for example, something. When the attribute is changed in this element, this method will be called by browser, and I can, for example, re-render something or do whatever I like. And as well, the static property, this is the getter, as you can see. This getter provides the list of attributes that the browser should track to notify us with this call by calling this method. Cool. Those are methods required because they are the browser API. But other one is just created by me. For example, render, it's my own method, but it's still public. For example, properties like name, pattern, or this attributes as well, as you can see, it's static as well. They are as well public. Everybody can have access to them and do whatever they like, but they are they don't need to be public. Here's my idea. As you can see, I call render when I need it. For example, when the certain attribute is changed, name, or when the first time the element is added to the page. But I don't want this method to be called by other developers because they may not understand the internal stuff, internal code of this component, and that may cause some issues. For example, as you can see here, this is I create the element, and this is how I set this name attribute. When I set this attribute, the browser will call this attribute changed callback because I add this attribute name in this observed attributes array. And as you can see here, I update my private property name and I will render the entire component. Cool. It works. But as well, the same thing can be achieved by just updating the name, and calling render by some developer. And this is buggy because it's not the right way, because different components may have different behavior, and doing this is it's valid, good solution, but it's can cause certain problems. For example, someone will update the name, thinks that the name is the setter, there is a setter for the property name, and the component will be re-rendered automatically, and not calling this, for example. And that will be a problem because when you set the name, as you can see, there is no setter here the name will be just set, this property, this field will be just set, but not render not happens. And this kind of thing. And that's why we want to hide certain methods or certain fields and make them private. And that's cool. In ancient times, probably you've heard about such technology as underscore. We mark methods that better not touch by other developers with underscores. After that, we even have such bundlers that will replace this underscore methods with something, I don't know, hashable, like hash 1, 2, the method cannot start with the number. Actually, it can, but A to B, and so on. Yeah, for other developers afraid to using them because they're not real named, that like hashes and hashes can be changed at some point, and that's why you better not to use. But it's just we pretend that we have a private methods. We still can access them at some points. Also, after that, we had the coolest technology is the TypeScript, where we can mark all those methods and fields with the private word, and on the stage of compilation, the TypeScript will check that other developers should not use these methods or fields redefined. And that's very great because we have at least like warning, we have all those checks, but if we don't use the very, very strict mode of TypeScript, when you're not allowed to use any or like other forbidden stuff, you may, if the developer really wants to reach this private stuff of your class, he can or she can just take the object of this class and assign the type any and have access to this pattern or name and do whatever he or she wants. And this is not the worst scenario. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's really rare case. But we want something really private to be 100% sure. And right now in JavaScript, we have this ability. The only thing we should do is to put the hashtag before the name of our field or a method. And that's cool. Yeah, it may remind you about PHP and those days when you start developing on PHP with this $sign before the variable name. But well, let's not talk about this right now. Okay, yes, let's try this. I won't show, okay, I will show you after that how it works. Okay, the only thing that we should do to make this, for example, field private is to put a hash in front of the name. Yeah, as you can see, let's do it something like this. It's private right now, as well as this private method render. Awesome. And of course, not only the usual methods can be private, but as well as static fields and methods. Awesome. This property as well should be private. Cool. What it means? It means right now this won't work. This part of code won't work. Even if we put something like hash, Visual Studio Code not showing that this is a problem, which is problems of Visual Studio Code, but the browser will warn you about this because it's wrong usage of private methods, because you cannot access them. Let's see. Open the browser, restart. As you can see, yeah, browser tells us private fields hash name must be declared in an enclosing class. Yeah, it means like you cannot override something, and this is great. There is only one way right now to update my component. It is by setting the attribute name, and this is cool. Let's remove this, see whether it's working or not. Probably I invented this syntax and nothing is working. As you can see, it works. Awesome. There is a small code that updates it just sets the new attribute value from this text field, but yeah, you understand. Awesome. And this is it. That's all about this feature. One thing that I want to mention, that it's not actually protected as Java or C# class. It's actual private methods. It means, like, if we have something like this, you have, for example, the class humiliate, yeah, and you want to extend the component cheer up and want to redefine the pattern, it won't work. I mean, as you can see, the pattern property is defined inside the humiliate, but it's not redefined the pattern here. Second feature is really tightly coupled with the previous one, the first one, the private fields and private methods. And it's kind of weird because it's hard to understand how you are going to use it. But it's really cool feature because it shows how this private methods and properties is working inside JavaScript. Yeah, and how they should work, at least, according to documentation. Who knows how browsers implemented it. Okay, as you can see, we have a class A, yeah, and there is a private property, A, yeah, that has value 1. Cool. We have static method that tries to get from the object, any object. As you can see, there is no restrictions on the type of the object. Try to get the private property A, which is not allowed, how we saw in the previous example. But as you can see, it tries to get not just the usual private method or field. It tries to get the same private field that this class has. Interesting. Yeah. And it will work only with the objects that were created from this, or are created from this particular class. They won't work with the objects that were created or are created from the different class, for example, B, as you can see, that has the same private property name, yeah, as you can see, A. And how it works, probably based on this new primitive, like relatively new primitive symbol that we have in JavaScript. Yeah, and this class stores the link to this symbol. It's unique, and this unique identifier, it checks, like, try to get from the object something that has this unique identifier. Yeah, cool. And as far as it's two different classes, it has two different unique identifiers for this private methods, and that's why you cannot get the private method of the object that was created from the class B inside the class A, because technically those are, even if they have the visual, the same names, visually, like #A, they have different, like, private identifiers, which is cool, great. But the feature is a bit different. The question here is how we can tell that this particular object has this private field or property. And the feature is you can create method something like this, as you can see, check, where you check whether this private property exists in a given object. And this part won't raise an exception because we're just checking, okay, this is our unique identifiers, whether it exists in this object. Cool. And this is how, that's all. This is the feature. And you may say, okay, why do we need actually this, for example, check, if we can check whether the object is the instance of A? For example, yeah, like this. For example, this one will return false. Yeah, because the object that was created from the class B, and class B is not inherited, nothing, not even connected with that class A, is not an instance of A. And you're right, completely right. This check will work. But this particular part of the specification tried to cover this unusual examples. Yeah, we'll see there are more features that try to think out of the box and check all the possible options of using JavaScript. And in this case, for example, we have this example when we create a new object, yeah, from the prototype of the class A. In this case, yeah, that's very rare cases, but you still can do this nowadays. Of course, nowadays it's not that common to use that. But it's still, you can create an object like that. And this object will be an instance of class A, because we created from the prototype of class A. Cool. And this check will return a true. And that's why if we rely on this instance of a check, at some point, in some rare cases, we can have an exception that we try to get the private property of the object that is not there. And that's why it's cool thing that you can create method something like this, check, yeah, to check whether this object has this private property or not. And let's see all those examples, yeah, what they return. The first thing, it's understandable. We try to get the private data, we try to reach this property, and as far as we have this unique identifier inside this class, yeah, we managed to get the actual value. The result should be 1. Next, yeah, it's clear, false. Next, the same, kind of clear, because the usual object doesn't have this private property A, and that's why, yeah, it should be false, because it's check. Second, false. That's why we created this method, check. Cool. Here, as I said, it will be true. And this particular example is the thing that we should cover with this check method. This will return false, because even if you create object like this, still you cannot trick this check method, because we try to check an actual identifier, whether this actual identifier present in the object or not. That, as you can see, is set like, yeah, this part will be set in constructor, but this, yeah, I forgot to mention that, yeah, of course, why it won't work, because this one not called the false, right, and true. Awesome. Right now we became a bit smarter. See you in next feature. Next feature, feature number 3. This feature is not the feature that you will use on a daily basis, yeah, but it's probably more helpful for the people who develop the libraries or frameworks or something this kind of, but we're here to become smarter, and that's why let's look at this feature. Let's imagine you have the object like this. It's object A with the property A. Okay, let's call it the object B, for not to mess up with the property and object B. In this case, if you want to know whether this object B has property A, you will call something like hasOwnProperty. Cool, and it will work. But how it will work? Because as you can see, there is no method hasOwnProperty in this object. It will work because all objects in JavaScript inherit from this global object, object with big O, yeah, and it has prototype, and inside the prototype we have this hasOwnProperty method. And if you have this as a link in your proto, the JavaScript will check first your object, like there is no method, and will go to the proto link and find this object. And as you can see, it will find this method hasOwnProperty, okay, and call this method. And that's why it will work and return you true, because the object B has property A. Okay, but as framework developer, I can trust the users or the developers who use my framework, because they can pass all types of objects. And as an example, object like this will create an object, the same, but the proto link will be null. It means the JavaScript will do the same check as we see here, yeah, cannot find the hasOwn property and try to follow the proto link, but the proto is null. Okay, we cannot find this property, then this property does not exist in this object. Great. And in this case, there will be an exception called like hasOwn property is not a function, isn't defined, is not a function probably. Let's see, let's call it, yeah, it's not a function. Yeah, I was right. Because, as I said, the proto is null and it cannot reach this object, this method in the object with a big O. And the library and framework developers come up with a solution. They can call the same method, but from the prototype where it 100% exists, like object, prototype, hasOwn property, and use call to pass the context B and the property A, and this should return true. But it's kind of and it will work the same here because technically the JavaScript won't search for this hasOwn property method in this object because we already have, this is our method that we call. It just, the object just passed as a context for this method. Great. And this is kind of a long and hard to use in daily basis, and what if you don't develop this particular framework but you need to check something, and the safer is to have a method that will work in all the cases. And this is a new method in JavaScript that will work in both of these cases, like let's change it to B. Yeah, and in this case, as you can see, we shouldn't search for the methods in the proto, but we, again, the same as here, through the prototype, we call hasOwn, and the JavaScript checks whether this property exists in this object or not. The first parameter should be an object where we want to check this property, and the second should be a name of this property or method. And in this particular example, we will have in console, this will return true, that will return true, that should return false, because this is an object, but it's an empty object and doesn't have this property A. This will return true and this false. Okay, true, true, false, true, false. And let's see, let's clear out console. True, true, false, true, false. Looks good. See you on the next feature. Feature number 4, and it's a new method for promises. I know that there are a lot of methods for promises, and all of them are kind of the same, but this one is the special one. At some point, probably we should stop adding new methods for promises and come up with one method that will solve all our problems, but that's a task for the future generations. Right now, we should learn how this new method works. Okay, this new method is called any, and it's kind of the same as all other, like all settled and raise. It takes a list of promises, yeah, and return a promise that will be either resolved or rejected. In this case, the any waits for the first promise to be resolved. In my example, you see that there is like 2 resolved promises, and it will wait for the first one. Yeah, it's not in the order of the list, but it just when it happens that when the first promise is resolved, the returned promise as well will be resolved as well with the same value. In this case, it will be 1. Let's see, let's save. Yeah, I checked 2 times before. Yes, it's 1. Great. And probably you have a very cool question. What will happen if I don't have any resolved promises and I have only rejected one? Great question, by the way. And the return promise will be rejected, and you will see the catch callback will be called. But the problem here that we don't know the error. What error should be raised here? In this case, you can see we have 2 different errors, like something went wrong and something went wrong too. and we don't know whether error should be there, and that's why the JavaScript committee come up with the new type of error. It's called aggregate error. You may see an example here. As you can see, it's E. It's an aggregate error, and it aggregates a list of different errors. In this case, I come up with the two errors, like my error 1 and my error 2. And as a usual error, because it inherits from the usual error, from basic error that we have in JavaScript, it has a message. And as you can see, you can pass as a second argument the message, and it will be, in my case, this is error. It should be this is an error. Okay, cool. In the same will happen here. If there are only rejected promises, the promise that is returned here will be rejected, and the error will be aggregate error. Yeah, and this aggregate error will have has a new property errors with list of errors with list of errors that happen. And in this case, there will be two errors, something went wrong 1 and something went wrong 2. Yeah, and the message will be something generic. You will see. Okay, yeah, let's clear my terminal and see. As I said, this is the aggregate error. This is the message. All promises were rejected. And this is the property errors that we have. And you see that we have two errors. Yeah, something went wrong 1 and something went wrong 2. Great. Great. But there is a final question. What the difference between any, all settled, and other methods for promises? Okay, let's check them out. Let's put them in one file and come up with one example and see what the difference. Okay, as we know, how any behaves in this situation. It will wait for the first promise that is resolved, and this one, and the return promise is resolved. And if there are no resolved promises, this method will wait for all promises to be rejected and rejects the returned promise with the aggregate error. Cool. All settled behaves a bit differently. It will wait for all promises to be settled. It means it won't ignore any promises. It will wait for all of them have a certain state and return an array of objects that has value and status. The status will be rejected or resolved, and the value will be value for resolved, and there will be a new property reason if the promise is rejected and has an error or something that this promise was rejected with. Cool, but in this case it will wait for all the methods, but for all the promises, but any will be resolved with the first one. Cool. Race, it's kind of a different beast. It behaves the same in terms of resolved promises. In this case, the race and any will behave exactly the same, because the first promise is the promise that will be resolved. Race and any will resolve the promise that is returned with this value. But if we change the order of this, for example, yeah, and right now the first promise in this list will be rejected. It's not the first in the list, but in the time. The first is rejected, and any will wait for the next one to be resolved. But race will reject the returned promises with this error. It won't come up with aggregated exception or error. And the final one is all waits for all promises to be resolved. If there are no promises, if there are one promise is rejected, the promise that is returned will be rejected, and yeah, it just waits for all to be resolved. And this is the difference between them. Feature number 5. It's very short feature. Okay, this is a new method for the array. It's called add, and it returns you a value at that position. You may ask, Vlad, why do you need to write this array, this method, call this method, if you have the same behavior like this? Yeah, I would say you're totally right, but it helps you, for example, to return a last element of this list. You cannot do something like this. Yes, in Python or in other languages probably you can, but in JavaScript you cannot. We can reach this with the proxy method, but again, you need a library and patch all the arrays, which is not good enough for us. And yes, and that's why we need add. You may also say that, okay, we can get the last element of the array by taking the length of this array and substitute 1 and doing something like this. And you're completely right, this is a great solution, but it won't be as clear as here in the example below, that if you filter this array and you got a new array with a small amount of elements, you need to save this array in a new variable, take a length of this variable, and after get the last one. But with the add, it can be done like this. As you can see, I filter all the elements inside the array and get the last one, which is, to my mind, is way more clear, and I love this. See you on the next feature. I said that I love previous feature, but what I actually meant that I love this one, the 6th one, because it's really great feature. After I discovered this, I got raised. I started sleeping well. I got promoted. I'm not sure how those things connected, but I'm pretty sure that everything because of this feature. Let's see. Okay, we have a new method called save to server, and it saves some information about user, books, bookmarks, different kind of information. As you can see, it calls 3 methods that, let's imagine, saves all those information to the server. But all these methods has limited amount of information inside them. For example, save user saves only user and doesn't know about the bookmarks or books. The save user books saves only books and doesn't know who the user is, but only knows about the books, and save bookmarks the same, as you can see here. But the problem here that if any of those methods has an raise an exception, yeah, or throw an error, it will have a limited amount of information about this error. Because, for example, let's imagine the save bookmarks throw an error. It will have information about what bookmark cannot be saved, yeah, but we don't know about the user or books, nothing. We know only about bookmarks because we pass only information about bookmarks there. Yeah, and in this case, I want to add more context to this error, to send it, for example, to the server, or to understand where to find this error, what user to blame, or what book to blame, and to search for this exception. In this case, as you can see, I just rethrow it, but it's not the thing that I wanted. And one of the solutions to this is to come up with a new error, yeah, and create a new message. Save the old message, message, and add a new information, more information. For example, in this case, I add a username, and it should work. But the problem of this solution that I lose the stack trace, because when I throw, I create a new error that doesn't have that stack trace and doesn't have that, for example, methods like, let's imagine it's aggregate error and doesn't have this property errors inside it. And it's just a completely new error, and I lose a lot of information. Yes, I saved the message itself, but Sometimes I need more, like, for example, stack trace. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, as you can see, it throws an exception. Data is undefined for Bob. Cool, we know the the username, and we see an actual message that we get from the inside bookmarks or books, I don't know. And this is the problem, because as you can see, the stack trace is simple. It starts from the point where we throw this new error, and we don't have information where it happens. Probably it's inside books, save user books, or save bookmarks. We don't know. Yeah, and this information lost. To solve this problem, usually we come up in JavaScript, we come up with some custom error. Let's see how it looks like this. As you can see, our custom error is a class that extends actual error class, but also have this property called inner error, where we put the error that we like the reason why it happens. Yeah, the reason. Yeah, let's call it reason, and it's inner error, and come up with some new message that we want to put, the like aggregated message. Let's see what happens. Yeah, in this case, it solves all our problems because we have a full information. For example, we can put the username here, something went wrong with user, and we have an original method, error object, where we have the entire call stack, and that we can get and, for example, find the reason. Let's see how it works. Let's clear our console. Cool. As you can see, we have our new error. We have something went wrong with the Bob. Cool. And we have this inner error property. And let's see. Okay, the error happens inside save bookmarks. That's great. This is the solution. But the problem with this solution that we need to come up with with our own custom error. And all projects, for example, all frameworks, all libraries have to create this new custom error. And we have to name this property like inner error and tons of different names. And we don't have a standard way how to call this. And with a new JavaScript, and this is this feature, is about to create this one name that will satisfy all our needs. And this is a new property called cause. And right now, the error class can be, error constructor can have two arguments. The first one is the error message. Yeah, as you can see, error happened for user, and after you can pass an object. And this object may have one new property called cause, where you can put the original cause of this error, your original error, the same as I did with the custom error. Great, and it will work completely the same. We will save the call stack and original error message, and also we have a more context about where it happens, for what user it happens. Okay, let's see. Let's clear how it looks like. As you can see, the same. We have our original error message. Error happened for Bob. Okay. We have our call stack for this particular, our new method, error that was rethrown. Yeah, but also we have in cause, we have this original error, not changed. Data is undefined, and where we have it, as you can see, somewhere in this line, which is great. And right now we have standardized way of doing it in all our frameworks, all libraries, and in all our projects, and we can come up with the better errors and better error handling. Finally, we reached the last one. This feature is really great. Probably you not going to use it straight away, but you definitely will use it when you create your own framework. React, Angular, Svelte, it's all for boomers. Create your own framework. Revolutionize the web development, become the new young Lenin or Elon Musk. Okay, let's see this feature. This feature called class static block, where it's feature about like defining your declaring your static properties of your class. And let's imagine you come up with a new shiny DI dependency injection framework. But this is the idea of it. You have a class, and to know what the services should be passed in constructor, you have this dependency property where you list all the services that this class requires. For example, store and translate, it depends on the store and translate. As well, you decided to list all the phrases that, for example, should be translated for this particular class and will be used inside this class. And here we go. Here's a list of phrases. Cheer up, great job, you are awesome, you are so smart. Thank you, class A. You are also so smart. Okay, this is great and it will work. But what if we have the class B that depends on the class A? It means like we need to pass all the dependencies. The class B should have the same dependencies that class A and plus their own dependencies. And we need to clone the list of dependencies in the static field dependencies for the class B, and the same about the phrases. Great, and it will work. But let's imagine, what if we have class C that depends on both of those classes, and we need every time clone our classes and every time clone the list of phrases and everything. And of course, probably we want to make them unique. The phrases should be unique and not to translate every time the same phrase multiple times. Yeah, and sometimes you probably remove one class and it's not dependency anymore, and you forget to remove from dependency list. It still pass the service, all this stuff. And that's why probably better solution will be the defining the list of dependencies. Yeah, and that's all. And after that, the code will generate the list of dependencies as the names of dependencies as the services, and list of phrases their own. Yeah, and in this case we need the static block class because it's just a block of code. As you can see, there's curly brackets before we say that everything should be static. Yeah, and here in this block of code you can define your static properties. For example, as you can see, I defined the same properties, dependencies and phrases, but with an actual code. I have a list of dependencies, A and B, and I can update them, like put another B here, for example. Doesn't matter. This code will run through every dependency, yeah, and come up with a list of dependencies name that should be passed with our DI framework. And as well as phrases, but here I not only come up with a list of phrases that should be translated, but as well as I remove all repeated duplicates from this list and keep only unique phrases. Yeah, the code, it's funny, I can use set, I know, but let's imagine this is the code. And this is the feature. The feature is you can come up with a block of code that will define static properties for your class. And as you can see, it works. I hope so. Let's run it. Yeah, it works. As you can see, it repeats the static method because we have the same dependencies here, but we can come up with the same unique code, the phrases, and everything should be fine. Yeah, as you can see. Great. And that's it. this is the feature, and it's very helpful when you write something like come up with the classes, want to define some properties, like run some code before the class is generated, is created, like the defined, sorry, and put all those properties, like calculate them and do all this stuff. Great. And this is it. That's all features for JavaScript 2022. I hope it was very great time for you. Sorry for my spelling mistakes and probably for speaking mistakes. I hope you will understand everything. Okay, see you on the final words for this video. That's it. You mastered this new JavaScript. And right now you are the coolest developer in the office, even if you are the only one developer in your office. If you like this video, please click thumbs up, subscribe to see more, and leave the comment about how my English weird is, or how my accent weird is, or how good and magnificent my coding skills. See you on GitHub.